If you struggle with Enscape materials like curtains, fabrics, mirrors, etc., this video is perfect for you since it will cover all of those topics. So make sure to watch the video all the way to the end to master materials once and for all. Before we start talking about how to configure materials and how to get them to look the best way possible in Enscape, we first have to make sure where do we actually find and source the materials. So first off, I'm just going to show you 3 websites that I personally use in my day-to-day work, as well as the whole team in my rendering firm. So the first website that I want to show you is Ambient CG. And by the way, all of these 3 websites have free materials. Some of them are paid, but most of them are free, and they are good enough for you to actually work with them. And I'm not sponsored or affiliated with any of these 3 websites. So this is just me showing what I actually use in my day-to-day work. So let's go to materials. And as you can see, there's many materials that you can find. And then you can also search them through different categories. So you can just do wood, you can do stone and stuff like that. And then there's pretty much the same thing with the other websites. Obviously there's other good websites for materials, but these are just what I personally use in my day-to-day work. But I mostly use Ambient CG, and this is what I'm actually most comfortable with using. For the sake of the example of this video, we're going to get started with a wood material. So I'm just going to type in wood, and then we can just scroll down a little bit and kind of see what would fit within our needs. So I chose this one just for the sake of the example on this video. And then once you open and click the material that you want to download, you can see that there's a preview of how the material will look like when you actually import it into your rendering software. And then in the right here, you can see the different options that you have to download. So how do you know which is the right version for you to actually download? So as you can see, you have 1K, 2K, JPEG files, and then you have PNG files. So what I would honestly suggest you is, if you first want to look at the quality, so as you can see, 1K, 2K, 4K, this is the resolutions of the actual materials. I personally use 2K materials for the ones that are not very close to my compositions, but when they are closer to the camera and I have an up close shot of them, I try to get the highest resolution texture. That way you can look as clear as possible in the render. And then the PNG ones are more suitable for materials that are actually transparent. So for this example, I'm just going to choose 4K and JPEG, and then the file is going to download as a zip file in your computer. And as you can see right here in my Chrome tab, I can just click it and then it opens up something like this. So what we need to do is actually create a new folder wherever we want to place them. And then once you extract them from the folder that you downloaded, you can see that there are many different file types for that material. You can see the ambient occlusion texture, you can see the color texture, the displacement, the normal map, and the roughness map as well. So what I usually need for these type of materials in Enscape is the color map or the albedo map, which is also known as a diffuse map, which is our base. And then we have a material for the bumps to kind of make it more 3-dimensional. And then you have the roughness map, which is for the actual reflection and kind of how shiny the material is. So let's just go through them one by one slowly. So this will be the actual base of the material. When we upload this in the SketchUp tab, is going to be very flat, and we're just going to take a look at that in a minute. And then we also have the displacement map. So just to kind of give you a rough idea of how these work, so wherever there is dark spots on the actual image of the displacement map, those are going to be the parts that are going to be lower in that material when we upload it in Enscape. The ones that are wider are going to be elevated from the rest of the surface. So now we're just going to go straight into SketchUp, and then I'm going to showcase how to do this all step by step. If you don't want to go through all of these websites, you can find a link in the description where you can get 20 materials all for free that I collected for you that are easier for you to access. So feel free to click the link in the description to get those materials for free. Okay, so now we have joined SketchUp, and this is just a basic modeling just for me to showcase to you the actual wood material I put up some lighting outside. What we need to do to actually import the textures depends on your native modeling software. So for me, I'm using SketchUp, and then it's quite easy. So we just go to the materials and we click this plus icon which says create material, and then once we're here, we can just click this folder icon where I can browse the image, I can find my material, and then I just choose the color texture. This is very important. You don't want to import any of these other textures. You want to make sure you import either the color textures, the albedo, or the diffuse map, which are kind of almost the same thing, except for the albedo that doesn't actually include shadows in its image. So now I'm just going to click OK, and then I'm just going to click on the floor here, and then I'm just going to apply the material in the actual floor. So there's 3 things that I like to do before I move on on to the rest of the maps, I want to make sure that I have the correct size of material. I want to make sure that I don't need to actually tweak the color of the material as well as the positioning. So for this one, I think I will just need to actually change the size because it's a bit too small as of now. So I think 80 by 40 is going to work all right. I'm going to open the Enscape tab and I'm going to keep it here on the side, and I will keep the actual camera focused on the material. So as you can see right now, it looks flat. It doesn't have much depth nor much actual reflections. It's all default setting. So to configure the material that we just exported, we need to click Enscape Material Editor, which is this icon with the black and white spots. Once I click it, I have to make sure that I actually selected the texture that I want to edit, and then here's where all the magic happens with the materials. So you can see that there's three sections right here. We have the albedo section, we have the height map, we have the reflections, and then the transparency map. There's also a type section for the materials, which we don't need to go into as of now. We're just going to focus on the generic ones. So right here is the imported color map that we did before. We have the color of it. We can also add a tint. So what this does is kind of like an overlay of the actual material, which will change the color of it. So if we just do the gray one, as you can see, it makes the floor darker, but we don't need that as of now. So we're just going to leave it at default. The image fade option kind of acts as a transparency option for the material, but it actually has the color in the background. So what I mean by this is that the lower the image fade is, the closer the material is going to be to the color right here. And then as you can see, when I put the image fade at 0, you can see that it only emits the color that we have chosen here. So I'm going to go back to 100% because we don't need that as of now. So the albedo section is already all set up for us in this material. Obviously, if we want to click the image and kind of change the width, the height, and the rotation of it, we can do that in Enscape. But in my personal experience, I think for the albedo map, it's much easier to actually do the transformations in the SketchUp window. So now we're going to move on to the height map. So at the height map, we have the type of the height map, which can be a bump map, a normal map, and a displacement map, which all have different meanings. The displacement map is more to divide, which all have different usage, and as of now, Enscape doesn't have a feature where we can use all of these three maps at the same time, which kind of holds back the software a little bit, but I'm sure that is going to be updated soon. So for now, we're just going to choose a displacement map because that is what we have imported from the Ambient CG website. Now right here we have the option to load the displacement map. Now there's two things that we can do. We can load our image from the folder that we downloaded previously, or we can use the albedo map. So what the albedo map is that it creates a displacement map by itself based on the image that we have here. So it kind of is almost guessing on where the depth of the material will be. It is not always the most accurate. So when you actually have a displacement map that you can import, just use that because it's going to be much better. So I'm just going to go to texture, click this file icon right here, and then once it opens up, I'm going to choose the displacement map that we have. Now as you can see, it went back to bump map, but we have to make sure that the map is chosen correctly. So we're just going to do the displacement map, and as you can see now it has depth. Obviously 3.0 is just way too much. We're just going to change that to something like 0.5, and as you can see now the material has depth even in the spaces between like the actual planks, and this looks much better. So with just one simple click we can get this result. Now as you can see, PBR materials are very useful. If you don't know what PBR materials, it stands for physically based rendering, which means all the materials are based from real life physics and configuration. So we're going to leave the displacement map like this as of now, and then we're going to move on to the reflection section. So at the reflection sections, we can also import the texture that we had earlier. We can also use the albedo map. As I said, it basically has the same way of using it as a displacement map, but we can also do it manually. So if you go to the roughness, we can change how much the material reflects. So right now it almost looks like a mirror, which we don't actually need. This is not the most useful thing that we can do for our material. If I didn't have a roughness map for a material like this, I would probably do something like 70%, which seems all right. But the difference between using the manual roughness slider and using the actual texture image is that the roughness slider makes the same reflection on the whole surface, while the texture image kind of gives difference in what spots reflect more and what spots reflect less. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go and open the file that we had earlier, and I'm going to import the roughness image. Now as you can see, this is still way too much, but there's a bit of tweaking that we can do. Now the metallic slider we don't have to worry about as of now because this is only used for metallic surfaces, which the wooden floor obviously is not. So I'm just going to click the actual image right here, and then we can also tweak the brightness of it, which is basically how much you want it to actually affect the image, which we don't need as of now. But to make it look even better, we can invert it, and then we can just use the slider a little bit to actually tweak the roughness. So the lower the roughness, as you can see, the less reflections now that we have inverted it. But if the brightness is higher, it will have more reflection, and for me, I think that 65% would work fine with this material, and it's looking quite good as of now. There's not much that I would change. You can obviously play with the specular option. The specular option, I'm just going to leave it at 50 at default. It looks completely fine. Now that I'm looking at it, there's probably something that I would change to this material. I would probably like to make it just a little bit darker, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that in the SketchUp tab. So what I will do is I will just click a little bit over here and see how it affects the image, and now it looks like it has even more depth and the contrast is bigger. Obviously this depends on your project and if you actually have to use a certain type of look in the actual material. So there's another real cool feature that actually speeds up your workflow in Enscape, which is naming the materials. So one really cool thing that you can do is that Enscape can detect what kind of material you want to use just by the name of that material. So if I go ahead and just place this material around this box that I have created in the file that we were moving previously, and then I name the material mirror, and then I just click outside somewhere, let's just say here. As you can see, Enscape will automatically give the material the configuration that it needs to actually look like a mirror. But if we go over here and I just type in emissive, Enscape will make the material emissive and it will put out light. Another thing that we can use this for is if I type in grass, as you can see, the material acts like it's grass and it's showing up some gray grass, but obviously this is not very useful for us as of now. We can also use this for other materials. So let's say glass. If you do glass, you can see that the material is a bit transparent. Let's just try a final one like ceramic. And as you can see, it will have some reflection into it. So it looks like a ceramic actual image. So something very cool. A lot of people don't use this because it has been a feature for a while and it's not used that much anymore, but it actually does speed up your workflow. So make sure you actually incorporate this in your workflow. Another material type that we can use is the clear coat material. So right here we have this Porsche 911 that we can change the actual material to look more like a car. So manually configuring this material is going to be much harder than going to the type of material that we want to use. We can click clear coat, and now as you can see, this Porsche is looking much better than it previously did, and it is looking much more realistic. So this is another material type. Now we can move on to the next one. So another interesting option that we have here is the self-illuminated option, and this can especially be useful for materials that are inside a lighting object. So to actually make it look much more realistic in this image, we're just going to go to the self-illuminated type, and then from here we can change its luminance. So we can make it a lot brighter or we can make it less bright. So for this one, we can just leave it around here and it will look all right. What we can also do is we can change the color that it emits, so something like this, or even make it like colder or any other type of light that we can distribute. So another option that we can take a look at is the carpet type of material. So we can do that here with the carpet or the rug that we have, and as you can see, it's very similar to the grass material. Honestly, I wouldn't suggest it to you most of the time because it doesn't actually look that much realistic, but sometimes it is useful for those kind of scenes when you have these types of carpets. There are two more material types that we're going to take a look at. It's going to be the grass material, which is already selected since the material that we have here already is named grass, so it says grass dark green, and Enscape has already detected that and chose the type of material. So there's a few things that we can do to the grass material, and it is very similar to the actual carpet material that I showed you earlier. We're just going to go here at the height slider so we can make it larger, or we can also change the height variation, which just means what is the difference between the height of the grass here. But honestly, I just keep them at default most of the times, where I usually like to even lower. The grass material in Enscape is alright, but it obviously can get better if you use like a scatter tool or something like that. What I would also do for this grass is maybe I would make it a bit darker, that way it looks much more realistic now, or I can also play around with the lighting by using an HDRI or something like that. Now another material type that we have to take a look at is the water material that we have here on this pool. So I'm just going to choose this. It is already selected water, since as you can see here, it is named pool water. So as soon as Enscape detects that a material is named after something, it will automatically give its features to that material. So the water material, as you can see, has a little bit of movement, and that's because we have wind settings turned on, the visual settings right here. So if I go to atmosphere, and then we have the wind, so the higher the intensity is, the faster the waves will move. We can also change the directions on which the waves move and all of that. But what we can also do is we can override those settings with this option right here. We can change the intensity, we can make it a lot higher, so something like this would be way too much, but as you can see, it's moving way too fast and it's simulating like it has a lot of wind. Or we can leave it a lot calmer. We can also change the height of the actual waves, so we can make the pool more wavy or less wavy, so this is a lot more natural, I believe. And we can also change the scale of the actual waves, so we can make bigger or we can make them smaller. So 100% is they're more dense, and like this they're a bit less dense. And the caustic settings is basically how much of the sun goes through the actual water. So if we change that, you can see that the surface underneath the water changes a little bit as well. Now there's also the foliage material, which is used for actual leaves and stuff like that. I rarely use this because I try to use as much vegetation from the Enscape asset library, and there the actual foliage material is already set up within the modeling. So let's just choose these leaves, and we can just choose the foliage material right here. As you can see, they're meant to look a little bit more natural, but they're not looking the most natural either way. So this is pretty much it with the material types that Enscape offers. Now we're going to move on to some more specific stuff with materials. So now that we took a look on some of the basics of the actual materials, now we're slowly going to go into some more advanced stuff, which is imperfections. Imperfections are very important to get a very realistic look, because in real life, if you haven't noticed, not all of the materials have a perfect look and are very seamless, and we need to do the same thing in our renders to actually make them look as realistic and as close to real world as possible. So without wasting any more time, let's just go straight into it. So this is one of the materials that I use in my rendering work to actually apply imperfections, and this is a scratches material that is used for metals like gold or even other type of metals, and basically makes them look way more realistic and match more to real life. So let's go and see how we can actually apply it. Now, as you can see right here, we do have a armchair that I'm just going to turn off the depth of field. And as you can see, the metal does have scratches because I did it previously. It does contain a bit of metal around it, and this is kind of rose gold. It does have that kind of look. Now, the material doesn't look that bad in terms of roughness. It does have a metallic look and all that, but there's the way that we can make this even more realistic. So this is how we will do it. So first of all, we're going to open the Enscape material editor. You obviously know where that is if you watched the video until now. And now we're going to go to the reflection section. And this is where we need to load the actual imperfection map. And to do this, we're just going to click the folder icon. And I'm going to go to a file that I already have some imperfection maps downloaded. And I'm going to choose this one. I know this is too exaggerated, right? But in some places, it does look much more natural because it does have scratches and it does look like it's worn out. So right now I have moved on with another file. We're going to take a look at another type of imperfection. Right here, we have a table which looks way too flat and irregular. Obviously, as I said previously, the roughness is all right and all of that. So now we're going to take a look at how we can make it even better, or maybe let's say a little bit more realistic. So the reflection section, I'm going to go here and I'm going to upload a fingerprint texture. So once I click on that and I go closer, soon enough we'll be able to notice what I meant by that. So now that we have selected the table material, the wood material here, I'm going to take the existing roughness texture that we had on and I'm going to apply this fingerprint texture. Now once again, as you can see, this is just way too over exaggerated, and then there's a simple way that we can actually fix this. So what I'm going to do is I will take this off completely and I will use an albedo map for the actual reflections. And now what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate the material that we have here. I'm going to name it imperfection and we're going to keep that selected. Now for this, we'll use the hand drawing tool or the hand drawing pencil that we have here, and I'm going to select it and I'm just going to draw an irregular shape of whatever size, and then it's going to be active on only a few sections. So I'm going to apply the material here and I'm going to go and upload the actual imperfection. So let me just go here. Now we need to change the size of it. Something like 200 would be all right, but now it also has to match with the rest. Maybe the hand drawing pieces that we did here are way too large, but you kind of get the idea that we can do simple things like this to actually make it blend in a little bit more. Now there's another way that we can make it blend in even more. So for example, in our case right here, we can go and play around with a specular option. We can make them more specular, less specular, however we need it, or we can also adjust it by the brightness. Obviously this makes it way too much. We can also change this in the source file. So if I go in the imperfection material that we had here and I go to edit and then I just do a quick adjustment, I make it a little bit brighter, so something like this. I can click save, and now if I go back to SketchUp and Enscape tab that we had here, you can see that the reflection of the actual wood will actually change together with the brightness, so the same way that we did previously. So I'm going to take the existing one off and I'm going to go ahead and apply it, and as you can see now it can blend better. Now what I also want to do is I want to change the size of the imperfection map to a little bit bigger, something like 0.6 by 0.6, maybe looks like a hand print or something like that, which blends in better. And now I can also try to make it even more realistic by cutting this part off, because I just think it's way too much. And yeah, I mean, this looks all right. Something like this can definitely improve your rendering, especially if you have materials like wood, tables, where in real life there's a lot of handprints and all that. So this can make your render much more realistic. So these are kind of the basics of the imperfections and a lot of the material settings. I do go through a lot of specific materials step by step in the Enscape expert program as well, which you can find a link in the description, but we will go through a few of them in this video. So without wasting any more time, let's jump straight in and I'll teach you how we can create a realistic curtain material in Enscape. Okay, so this is the actual curtain material that I have in this image, and as you can see, it's looking quite better than most of the time on how it looks with Enscape renders. So a lot of people do struggle with this, and I'm going to take this material in default settings to actually improve it and show you how we can create this look in the Enscape curtain. Okay, so this is how the Enscape curtains look at default. Obviously, it has some roughness modifications and all that. So this is how the curtain material would look in Enscape without any modification. So what a lot of people try to do, and obviously it was my first instinct when I started using Enscape as well, was this opacity slider, and you try to actually move the opacity slider to create a realistic look for the actual curtain. Now, as you can see, as soon as the slider goes under 95% opacity, it does have a weird grayish or blackish look that it emits, and it's definitely not very realistic for the curtain material. So there's a way that we can actually fix this, and it is very simple, and it only needs 2 steps. So the first thing is we're going to go to the transparency section here at the Enscape materials editor, and we're going to switch from transmittance to cutout. And then once we switch to cutout, we're just going to go to texture, and we're going to find a mesh of the curtain material. So I'm just going to type in Google curtain material transparency map. So as you can see, I typed this in. I'll just click at this image, and I can just right click and save the image in the computer as, let's say, curtain. So once I have downloaded this, I am going to go ahead in our cutout section, and we're going to load the texture straight into our Enscape window. And as you can see right now, it is looking much better than it previously did. But this is not all. There's another thing that we can do. So a lot of people tend to either do the type as foliage, which can also look good. I mean, it looks fine, but I honestly very rarely use this. It does emit the light inside from the exterior. However, I think that using the self-illuminated option as well is quite a good option, because it does emit light as well, and it looks like it's coming from the outside. So you can definitely switch between these options depending on the actual project, and this is the simplest way that we can create a curtain material. It's not very complicated. You just have to take these 2 steps, and then there you will have it. So this is basically how we can create a curtain material. It just includes 2 simple steps, and with those 2 simple steps, there you have the curtain material that you can incorporate in your own project. Another material that a lot of people struggle with is the fabric material, which we have here, and I believe this material came out looking quite well in Enscape. So we're just going to go through it real quick on how to actually get this look in fabric material. So we already have the texture applied to it. We're going to go ahead in the Enscape material editor, and I'm going to choose the fabric material that we have right here. So as you can see, one of the most important aspects for this fabric material is the bump map, since it is what it gives it depth and form. So let's see if it didn't have a bump map. As you can see, it's looking very flat and it's almost looking like plastic. But once we toggle the bump map to 10, you can see that it's looking much better than previously. Obviously, you have to play with the roughness as well, because it does play a role in how realistic the fabric material looks. And maybe 100% is just way too much, 90% is too low, so I like to leave this one, for example, at 85%, which I believe gives it a good realistic look. Obviously 80% doesn't look bad either. It's just somewhere in between those lines. Obviously you have to change this, but you can always change this depending on the project, depending on the lighting. It is not a set value, so just remember this whenever you're using Enscape or even any other kind of rendering software. Remember that most of the values change depending on the project, the setting, the lighting, the composition. Do not set your mind at fixed values, because that will make your renders look not as best as they can. So the final specific material that we're going to look at, where I see a lot of people struggling with, is the mirror material. Now, as you can see right here in this image, the mirror reflections are not very good, not only in Enscape but in all GPU renders, and that's because the lighting distribution, the reflections and all of that are not as accurate as with CPU renders. So as you can see, we have these lights here that aren't actually showing up correctly in the mirror material here, and as we get closer, some of them are completely disappearing and all of that. So we just have to make sure to actually get the reflections more realistic in Enscape. So to actually fix this is a very uncommon way to do it, but it's kind of like a getaway to get it almost right. So what I would like to do here is I'm going to select this whole model, and I'm going to copy it right here. And now the selected model, I'm going to flip it. And now once it is flipped, I'm going to get it right up close with the other model that we have near our mirror. Now the point of this is to actually mirror the environment itself, make this mirror see-through, and then that way it almost looks like it's mirroring. So what I'm going to do once again is I'm going to select this one. I'm going to make it transparent. And I'm going to go ahead and delete this mirror completely on this side, but we're still going to use it to create the hole on the wall. So something like this. And then what I'm going to do is I will just actually explode this thing. So just going to click explode a few times. We're going to explode the frame as well. And now what we can do is we can just push and pull this part into the wall here. So now what we are going to do, I'm going to go ahead and click inside the group of the wall. I'm going to select the circle, and now I'm just going to try and draw a circle right where the mirror is. Now I will move the circle onto the wall surface and kind of match it up a little bit more with the area of the mirror. And now we will just push this all the way through the actual wall, just something like this. And now we're just going to delete this part. We're going to delete the whole wall actually. So now we're just going to go through and select the wall that we have here. And what we will also do in this wall is I'm going to select the wall material. I'm going to select the center of the actual circle that we have here from the mirror. And I'm just going to create a circle like this. Now I will select this wood circle. I will move it on the face of the wall right here. So something like this. And now what I'm going to do is I will push this surface through. That way we can create a hole with it. And I will delete this wall completely. And now as you can see, we have the mirror as I said previously, and it almost looks like it's mirroring this side itself. It's showing up the materials and it's looking like a real reflection. It's looking much realer than it previously did. So this is kind of a getaway on how we can use the mirror material to simulate real mirroring and more realistic mirroring in fact. So now that you learned the materials, another very important component to actually getting realistic renders is lighting. So if you want to master lighting as well, make sure to click the video right here.